Now, inshallah, right before I introduce our panels, I'd like to make a slight confession. I was actually up yesterday very late preparing for this panel, preparing all the questions I'm going to ask our panelists and our guests, only to realize at the conclusion at around 3:30 a.m. that I was actually assuming that the panel would be on the topic that our sister Rabia Khidr just spoke about. So I had to have a dramatic shift in schedule. As if that wasn't enough, I looked this morning and the topic that I'm going to be moderating is polygamy. Now, I just got married 4 months ago. And I'm in really no need of trouble. But this actually got me to realize, based upon my reaction, to my gut, my visceral reaction as soon as I read this topic, I felt uneasy. I felt that it was a sensitive, controversial thing, and I didn't want to talk about it. But at the same time, that is precisely why we should be talking about it, because this is the attitude that I likely share with many of the people in the audience. And inshallah, this is precisely, we have panelists who have different areas of expertise that will be able to address these questions. So without further ado, inshallah, I'd like to call upon our panelists, beginning with Sheikh Faraz Rabbani, who you've already heard speak today, our sister, Dr. Zainab Alwani, Dr. Muhammad Bashir, and our beloved guest from Egypt, Dr. Omar Abdel Kafi. SubhanAllah, this really does feel like a living room. Okay, so as I began my introduction, I mentioned that a lot of us, especially ones of us who are either born or raised in Canada, feel that the issue of polygamy is a very sensitive one. Sheikh Faraz, earlier today you were mentioning that you have a particular sensitivity with another issue, that of abortion, and you prefer not to address it in specific case-by-case manners. So my first question is, why exactly does this strike a very sensitive chord with Muslims? And when this issue is brought up, and it is recurrently in the media, how should we deal with this and how should we respond to this?
I think one of the challenges is that we're very confused about these kinds of issues, right? Because people read the Quran and there's a permission given for multiple marriage. Yet at the same time, most of us know of disaster situations where people got married, took a second wife, or got married in secret, and so on. And we've witnessed the great familial and communal harms of that. Right? And then there's also the legal reality that it is against the law, right? So that's a point of sensitivity and confusion as well. And there's a lack of clarity religiously as to what is the religious limit regarding it. So a lot of people are confused. And the other aspect of that is, for many people, it is a false dream that they live, right? A lot of people who want to get married, who want to consider second marriage, is because the first marriage isn't working, right? So they harbor this secret dream that maybe, this one's not working, but eventually I'll have enough eventually I'll find a second wife.
Like an outlet.
Yeah, so it's an outlet. But in all of this mess, I think that the issue why it confuses so many people is that they haven't heard clear guidance. Okay, what is a proper, balanced religious understanding of the issue?
Jazakallah khair. Do any of our panelists like to comment further on that, or should I ask my next question? My next question, inshallah, was pertaining to polygamy in Canada in particular. Now, we know that from an Islamic perspective, there's a line that has to be drawn between the legislation of the country we live in and also adhering to our Islamic principles. And this is something that a lot of us feel confused about sometimes, because we feel that we have an Islamic duty at absolutely no exceptions, that we must practice every single aspect of our faith in every single domain, even if it means that we have to defy the legal or the legislature of the land in which we occupy. So Dr. Zainab, if you can perhaps comment on that, and maybe some thoughts from Dr. Muhammad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We have to, I think, to ask the question about the polygamy. Is it the universal part of the universal practice, or it's supposed to be the norm of the families, or it's a remedy or to answer some challenges in the society, as it was stated in Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4. And what are the conditions for this kind of marriages. So it's not something that is open, general, and universal. And all these questions we have to ask ourselves about also the outcomes of the families. This type of families, if we have, the Quran is stated very clearly about justice. And justice, it's not only for the women, the wives, but also for children. Do we meet this condition or not? And of course, despite also the reality about the legal system here, and again, now in many areas, in America, for example, I know you ask about Canada, but in America now, so many cases we have and we face when it comes with the second wife, that her marriage, it's not certified in the court, and she loses all her rights and her children's rights. So is this justice?
Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. I think part of the confusion comes from some Muslims think it is an obligation that they have to do to marry to a second or a third or a fourth wife. It is not like this. It is an option that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to us, and it was qualified with many things before one can take this option to solve certain problem under certain situations in the society. So when you are confused and you think it is an obligation, then you look at it, but how would I do? And the Canadian law it is considered an offense in the Canadian law, and you can get up to 5 years in prison for doing something like this. And all the states also, they prohibit polygamy. So that's where the confusion comes from. But if it is understood as an option to be used for certain situation, and it is qualified with many restrict things, I don't think Muslims will be confused. What Sheikh Rabbani said about that people do not understand it properly. This is the main reason for that.
I think one of the challenges that people struggle with as well is that a general ruling does not necessarily apply to each particular circumstance, right? And something that may be in itself permissible in a particular set of circumstances, it may take the ruling of impermissibility, which is why, for example, it's very interesting, in the early part of the 20th century, in India, one of the leading scholars of India, and he was a giant of Islamic scholarship, Ashraf Ali al-Tahanawi, he said that the general ruling in India at that time was that in general it would be impermissible to take a second wife. Without denying the base permissibility, but if you look at the general case, because there's a principle in the Sharia that anything whose harm predominates over its benefit, it would not be permissible, right? And they actually say this is not a legal principle, this is a rational principle, because any thinking individual would not allow themselves to do something whose harm is clearly greater than its benefit. This is in the general case, and what we see, and everyone else in this panel has more experience, but if you see the average case where someone is considering second marriage, in most cases, there's clear harm. They're not doing it for the right considerations, and there's a number of legitimate considerations, and they're not doing it in the right way, right? So in the general case, it's likely to be, certainly here in the West, but also in many Muslim countries. In the average case, it's not something that would be permissible. In particular circumstances, it may be, right? And that's where we have as a community challenge, which is that is it something that we need to struggle for the right of, because those particular circumstances are recognized, and there's a great wisdom and mercy in it being permissible, right? But is that something that, but that's a communal struggle. That's not something an individual can attain. And there, what the community has to prioritize. Is this what we need to be struggling for right now, right?
Dr. Bashir brought up an interesting point about the one side of the spectrum, the fact that there are some people who feel that there is a compulsion, a necessity to be married to multiple wives, even though this is not the case. Now, there's also the other side of the spectrum of individuals, Muslims, who feel that there is no circumstance that can justify polygamy, that it's a repugnant fact, that it's animalistic, that for a reason or another, it's something that should be condemned. And this, of course, a recent incident actually in Egypt, a female activist started an organization that actually promotes polygamy. And the reason for doing so is that she argues there's a very high percentage of women who are getting older, who are widowed, who are single mothers, having lots of trouble supporting their children, and who are in dire need for support and for the husband figure in the household. So how do we address the other side of the spectrum? Which, again, I don't mean to stereotype, but it's usually women who have this type of attitude. So Dr. Zainab, maybe you can start?
I will just mention the story of Fatima radiallahu anha, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's daughter. When she came to him after she heard about Ali radiallahu anha is getting married again with Abu Jahl's daughter, and she came complaining to her father, to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he went back after he listened to her complaint, and he addressed the community. And in his address, we can learn a lot about this type of marriages and how he said, "Wallahi inni la uharrimu halalan." And in this case, I'm not, and as we said, it's mubah, permissible. But at the same time, you have to understand the circumstances of women, the woman herself, the family, and how much the harm it will be caused by this marriage, or maybe the benefits. So we have to weigh both sides. In her case, in the case of Fatima, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentioned and focused on that she ستفتتن في دينها. ستفتتن, it means it will cause harm for her as a woman because she doesn't accept to share her husband with someone else. But in the case that, as you mentioned, if it's a remedy for or a solution for a problem, and the woman herself accepted, and that's when it comes the mutual consultation and accepting this kind or this type of marriage as a solution, of course it will be different.
Now the other, did you have a comment to make on that?
Yeah.
Sure.
We do lots of family counseling, and without exceptions, maybe 95% of the cases where we counsel because of people getting a second wife, it always caused harm rather than benefit. And here in Canada, it caused a great harm to the whole family, whether the first wife, the children, the second wife, and most of the time, it ended up with divorcing the second wife. And the other point is, Dr. Jamal mentioned in his lecture that the wife or the woman has the right in the contract, in the marital contract, to put any condition she likes. So if you think that some men do not understand the situation properly and you are afraid that they may resort to this kind of solution, put it in the condition on your marital contract. Right, very clearly. I don't want to have a second wife. You know, even if the laws of the country allows it, it has to be honored here because it's part of the contract.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, and I think one of the issues that seems to be very prevalent is that in many cases, of course, a lot of Muslims cherry pick rules from the Quran. And this is where men are at fault, in the sense that men know since they are 10 years old that they can have multiple wives according to Islam, much before they learn about the rights towards their first wife. And a lot of men actually, you know, when they really delve into the responsibilities and rights that they have towards their spouses and the vice versa, they realize that one wife is plenty. So my question actually now is for Dr. الكافي with regards to that. With respect to the rights and responsibilities of a husband to his wife. سؤالي لك يا فضيلة الشيخ متعلق بمعاملة الرجل للمرأة وكذلك للرجل. هل ترى أننا نسير على المنهج الرباني في هذا الأمر؟ وإذا لا فما تعليقك في هذا الأمر؟
أحمد الله رب العالمين حمد عباده الشاكرين الذاكرين، وأصلي وأسلم على سيدنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. أما بعد، تكملة لحديث الفضلاء العلماء الثلاثة بارك الله فيهم، أنا أدعو أولا كل الرجال المتزوجين أن يسيروا بالعدل مع الزوجة الأولى، لأن الزوجة الوحيدة الموجودة في البيت كثير من الرجال المسلمين لا يعدلون معها وهي واحدة. هذا في المقام الأول. الأمر الثاني أن البيئات التي جئنا منها وضعت في آذان الأطفال صغارا أن كيد الشيطان ضعيف كما ذكر في القرآن، وأن كيد المرأة عظيم كما ذكر أيضا في القرآن، ويلصقون هذه التهمة بالمرأة، فيتحفز الولد أو العريس منذ اليوم الأول لهذه الإنسانة الآتية ليأخذ منها موقف العداء لأن كيدها عظيم، مع أن قول الله عز وجل إنه من كيدكن إن كيدكن عظيم، هذه آية في كتاب الله في سورة يوسف، لكن الذي قالها قيلت على لسان ملك مصر ولم يقلها رب العباد كأمر ملازم للمرأة أن كيدها عظيم وهي إنسانة ضعيفة تحتاج إلى الحنان. أما الحديث دائما عن الزوجة الثانية أو الثالثة أو الرابعة، الإحصائية الأخيرة الشهر الماضي بين 1,540,000,000 مسلم أن 1% من المجتمع الإسلامي متزوج زوجتين، وواحد في 1000 متزوج من 3، ونصف في 1000 متزوج من 4. وإذا كشفت على قواهم العقلية بعد هذه التجارب سوف تجد أمرا عجيبا، لكن هذه النسبة الإحصائية الموجودة في مراكز البحث المعتمدة. أما مسألة أن يعني دائما أقول إن البيوت المتوازنة والساكنة والهادئة دعوها ولا تلعبوا فيها ولا تحركوا البركة الراكدة، وعلى المسلم أن يعيش في مساحة الفضل التي عند الزوجة، وتعيش الزوجة في مساحة الفضل الذي عند الزوج. عندئذ أرى أن الأمر بعد ذلك لا نستطيع أن نعمم فتاوى معينة، فلكل حالة فتوى، ولكل مقام مقال، ولكل بيئة كلام. والكلام الذي يقال في شمال أمريكا في كندا وغيرها لا يقال في جنوب الصعيد ولا في صحراء الجزائر، فإن الفتية تتغير بتغير الزمان والمكان والأحوال والأشخاص. ولقد رأينا عمر بن عبد العزيز وهو أمير المؤمنين كان أميرا على المدينة، وكان يقبل شهادة المدعي بشهادة رجل واحد، وعند غياب الشاهد الثاني أو المرأتين اللتين تشهدان بصدق هذا الرجل يقسم صاحب الدعوة. فكان يعني يأخذ القضية بشهادة رجل وقسم صاحب الدعوة. فلما انتقل وصار أميرا للمؤمنين في دمشق كان يأتيه المدعي ويقول: يا أمير المؤمنين ليس معي إلا شاهد واحد. يقول له: لا تصلح الشهادة، هذه شهادة ناقصة، لابد من شهادة رجل آخر أو امرأتين. فيقول: ليس معي إلا شاهد واحد وأقسم. فكان يقول: لا يصح. فيتعجب الرجل ويقول: يا أمير المؤمنين كنت تقبلها وأنت أمير بالمدينة، كنت تقبل شهادة وقسم صاحب الدعوة، فكيف ترفضها الآن وأنت أمير المؤمنين في الشام؟ يقول: أهل المدينة غير أهل الشام. تغيرت قبول الفتية عندما تغيرت الناس وتغيرت الأساليب وتغير اللف والدوران. أيضا رأينا أبو يزيد الرقاشي أحد كبار علماء المالكية كان يمكث أو يعيش خارج المدينة في أطرافها، وكان يتخذ كلبا خارج بيته، وكان المريدون يضحكون معه أو يضاحكون ويقولون: يا إمام أنت من كبار علماء المالكية وتتخذ كلبا، وتعلم موقف مالك رضي الله عنه من الكلب. يقول: لو عاش مالك إلى زماننا ورأى كثرة اللصوص لاتخذ أسدا ضارية. يعني إذن المسألة تغيرت بتغير الزمن، فكان ما يقال أيام مالك لا يقال أيام أبي يزيد أو غيره. ورأينا أن عثمان رضي الله عنه سار سيرة عجيبة في قضية الضالة، الناقة النادة الشاردة. كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يرد ضالة الإبل، يعني يشوف بعير ضال في شوارع المدينة لا يرده إلى بيت المال، يقول: لها حافرها وعليها سقاؤها حتى يأتي ربها. وجاء أبو بكر وسار على منوال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يرد الناقة الضالة، وجاء عمر وسار على منهج صاحبيه، فكان لا يرد الناقة الضالة. فلما جاء عثمان ويرى ناقة ضالة يأخذها من خطامها ويعيدها إلى بيت المال، فكان يتعجب الناس ويقولون: يا أمير المؤمنين، صنعت ما لم يصنعه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا الصاحبان. كان يبتسم ويقول: طالت الأيدي وكثر اللصوص. الناس الآن تستطيع أن تسير ناقة في وسط مونتريال مثلا يعني، وتقول من صاحبها؟ يطلع 3 مليون أصحاب الناقة، والصدق قد ولى من الناس، فتغيرت الفتية بتغير الزمان والمكان والأحوال والأشخاص. هذا أمر. الأمر الثاني أنك تعيش في بلد له قانون عام أنت قبلته، وقبولك بأن تربى هنا أو أن تولد هنا أو أن تعيش في كنف القانون وجب عليك كأنك دون أن تدري قد وقعت عقدا ضمنيا، وإذا لم توقعه على أوراق: وإنما المؤمنون عند شروطهم، ولو كان 100 شرط إلا شرطا أحل حراما أو حرم حلالا. فكأنك وقعت على احترام هذا القانون واحترام هذا الدستور. فكيف يخالف الإنسان الدستور لدرجة أن الجيش المسلم أيام عمر بن عبد العزيز لما دخل إلى جزء من البلقان عنوة واشتكى أهل البلقان إلى أمير المؤمنين، قالوا: كيف لم ينذرونا ولم يدعونا إلى الإسلام ولم يعني يبعثوا إلينا من يوضح لنا قضية الإسلام، وإنما احتلونا فجأة. أحال عمر بن عبد العزيز القضية إلى قاضيه، والقاضي مستقل في الإسلام، وأوشك القاضي أن يحكم في القضية. مات عمر رضي الله عنه وجاء من بعده، واستمر القاضي في القضية وقال أو أصدر فتواه أنه وجب على الجيش المسلم أن يخرج من البلاد التي يعني دخلها دون إذن ودون توضيح لقضية الإسلام وما في الإسلام من سماحة وغيرها. فما كان من الجيش المسلم إلا بدأ في الانسحاب، وما كان من الناس الذين كانوا في هذه البلدة إلا أسلموا عن بكرة أبيهم لعظمة هذا الدين واستقلال القضاء فيه. أذكر قبل قيام الاتحاد السوفيتي كان هناك في كييف ملك يسمى فلاديمير، مشهورة في التاريخ وإن كانت لا تظهر في الإعلان كثيرا. الإعلام يظلم حقائق التاريخ أو يكذبها أو يضللنا، لكن فلاديمير هذا كان الشعب الروسي شعب وثني، وكأن فلاديمير تعب من الوثنية هو ومن معه، فسير بعض من الخبراء في البلاد، ذهبوا شرقا وغربا إلى الصين والهند وإلى المنطقة العربية وإلى أفريقيا وإلى مناطق أخرى، وعادوا له بتقارير عن الأديان، دين المسيحي والدين الإسلامي والدين اليهودي والأديان الأخرى والأديان السماوية غير السماوية. فالرجل اطلع هو ومن معه فاقتنع أن أعظم وأقرب دين إلى الفطرة هذا الدين الإسلامي. فجاءوا قالوا: هل هناك من عالم مسلم نستفتيه؟ جاءوا بعالم من القوقاز وكان فقيها نصيا، والفقيه النصي يتعبنا ويتعب نفسه ويتعب من حوله، يعني ابن النصوص متعب. يقال في بلدة من البلاد عملوا حظر تجول بعد الساعة 5، ممنوع التجول. فواحد واقف عسكري وجد رجل يعني بالشارع الساعة 9 مساء: تعال يا رجل، ماذا تصنع؟ ألا تعلم أنك قانون بحظر التجول بعد الساعة 9؟ ماذا تفعل؟ قالوا: أتمشى. قال: ظننتك تتجول، يعني خلاص تتمشى أتمشى، المهم مش تتجول، لأن النص قال تتجول. جابوا الفقيه القوقازي قالوا: يا شيخ، نحن في بلاد باردة، تعرف منطقة موسكو ومع شمالها وسيبيريا منطقة باردة، لا نستطيع أبدا إن دخلنا دينكم أن نمتنع عن شرب الخمر وعن أكل لحم الخنزير. قال: لا بد من الامتناع عن الخمر والامتناع عن أكل لحم الخنزير. قال: وإن لم يكن؟ قال: لا يصح إسلامكم. فاختار فلاديمير المسيحية الأرثوذكسية، وذهب أكثر الروس في هذا الدين المسيحي الأرثوذكسي بناء على فتوى من رجل ينظر تحت قدميه ولا ينظر إلى الأفق السامي. أنا أعود إلى سؤالك لأقول أنا أطلت ولا ما لازم نسيك القضية ساخنة بصراحة، وفي دقائق والأساتذة تكلموا بإيجاز ما شاء الله، والكل طبعا لو استفتينا القاعة هل تريدون التحدث في 99.9% وكأنها انتخابات العربية من النساء، لا نحب هذا الحوار ولا نحب هذا الكلام أساسا، و120% من الرجال والله يفتحوا لنا الموضوع ويسروا لنا القضيه، قالوا نخالف القانون ونعمل الموضوع ده عشان فهذا الهوى لا يدخل في القضايا الكبيره هذه، وهذه قضايا لا تدرس ولا تقال في دقائق. هذا ظلم للقضيه، وهذا ظلم للحاضرين، وهذا ظلم للعلماء الفضلاء. ويعني انا يعني اشفقت عليهم وهم يتكلمون. الموضوع اكبر من هذا، والمساله نحن نريد ان نعيد الرفق الى البيوت، لا نضيف الفقر الى البيوت، لا نضيف المشاكل الى البيوت. البيوت تئن، والبيوت يعني سبحان الله انصرفت كثيرا. فالرجل سبحان الله العظيم يعني صار لا يدرك معنى يعني الأنوثة التي معه، والأنوثة التي هي معه لا تدرك معنى الرجولة والذكورة. والله عز وجل يقول وليس الذكر كالأنثى. لكن للأسف الشديد قر في أذهاننا وقر في أذهان الكثيرين أن مثلا كما يقول لكم هؤلاء الذين تعيشون بينهم إن المرأة مظلومة في الإسلام وأنها تأخذ نصف ميراث الرجل. والله درست أصول الفقه ودرست الفقه المقارن ربع قرن من الزمان، 4 حالات ترث المرأة نصف الرجل، و10 حالات ترث المرأة مثل الرجل، و30 حالة ترث المرأة أكثر من الرجل. ولكن الجهل بالفقه والجهل بأصوله هو الذي يجعلنا نسير يعني نزمر مع من يزمر ونطبل مع من يطبل. لكن القضية القانون أو في الدستور الأمريكي قانون المواريث 8 مجلدات أو أكثر. قانون الميراث الإسلامي 10 أسطر، لا تخرج عنه حالة أبدا في العالم، لا غني ولا فقير ولا من يملك ولا من لم يملك. واعرض أي حالة في العالم على قانون الميراث الإسلامي اللي هو من 10 أسطر فقط، سوف يخرج لك النتيجة واضحة. نحن ظلمنا ديننا بأننا لم نفهم، وظلمنا ديننا بأننا لم نطبق، وظلمنا ديننا بأننا ظلمنا نساءنا، وظلمنا ديننا بأننا لم نهتم بتربية أولادنا، وظلمنا ديننا في أننا لم نظهر نعمة الإسلام علينا، وظلمنا ديننا أن تركنا غيرنا يتجرأ علينا عندما رآنا نحن نتخلى عن قيمنا ومبادئنا. الآخر لا يريد منا إلا عرض الإسلام عرضا جيدا في سلوكنا وخلقنا. عمل رجل في 1000 رجل خير من قول 1000 رجل في رجل. لكن في النهاية أقول هل أنا راضي شخصيا عن حالات الزوجية في البيوت سواء في عالمنا هنا أو في عالمنا الإسلامي في الجنوب أو في الشرق؟ أقول أنا غير راضي تماما، لأن مواريثنا العرفية والعاداتية والأعراف السائدة في بلادنا جعلت الرجل يعامل المرأة معاملة سيئة، والمرأة تشكو من الرجل مر الشكوى. ولا عاصم لنا إلا أن يتقي كل واحد منا ربه، ونسأل الله السلامة الجميع.
بارك الله فيك وجزاك الله خير. SubhanAllah, in that answer, Dr. الكافي, for our non-English speaking guests, managed to single-handedly address all of the issues and questions that I would have had. So if time permits, I'll make a very, very brief translation, inshallah, of what he said. First of all, he began by saying that to begin with, before we start talking about multiple wives, all men in our presence and ones who aren't in our presence should start by first being just to their single wife, because this in and of itself is some matter that is unfortunately heavily neglected. The other issue is that he says that most of us come from cultures that have whispered into our ears that the capacity to lead people astray of the shaitan is weak, and that one of the woman is actually stronger. And he said that a lot of people who use this misguided philosophy base it upon a verse in the Quran which is actually not mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, it is a documented statement that was mentioned by the king of Egypt at the time. The third point he mentioned was that there's a very, very, very small percentage of polygamers according to statistics on earth. And that is because there are many, many different issues that take place, and each of these cases, as even Sheikh Faraz Rabbani said, should be treated on a case-by-case basis. So, and obviously he said that a lot of women, 99.9% of women, in fact, when polled, say that they prefer not to talk about this issue altogether, whereas 120% of men say they would. Now, the other point that he mentioned is that every single place on earth with regards to jurisprudence, with regards to legislation, differs by place, time, and people who are there. And as a result, a specific legal judgment that is passed for a certain city, for a certain people, cannot necessarily be applied, and in fact should not necessarily be applied upon another people of a different culture, a different heritage, so long, of course, as very fundamental Islamic principles are not being violated in that process. And he further went on to say that a lot of us, by choosing to be citizens in Canada in particular, and any other country that has a majority non-Muslim population, we have effectively agreed to sign that we will obey the laws of this country. And in fact, as a result of this, it is a duty, an amana upon us to actually respect that law and to not break that law so long as we are not being asked to make something that Allah has ordained as haram, impermissible, permissible, and the vice versa. So it is actually our duty to respect the laws of our land, and if these laws include a law that says that polygamy is not allowed, this is a law we will have to obey. Another point that he mentioned is that, and sort of to elaborate on this, he gave an example of a man who once observed a specific issue, and as we know in Islam, that when a certain matter arises, 2 male witnesses are sufficient to provide a testimony in regards to a particular issue, provided, of course, that they are righteous and so on. In this regard, a second male was not available to offer his testimony. As a result, they had to search for 2 women, but those as well were not available. So the Prince of the Believers accepted the testimony of the individual who is being testified against and the 1 male witness who was present. And this took place in Medina. Now, in a separate scenario, that same Islamic leader was subjected to an identical manner in which 2 men came forward. One of them was a witness and the other was not. The other was the man whom was being testified against, and he was trying to sufficiently testify for himself. And he relied upon the fact that this leader had previously allowed this in Medina. But he said to him, no, this is not acceptable here because this is Syria and its people are different than Medina and their people. As a result, this example shows us that we have to treat each of these matters on a case-by-case basis and with respect to the local laws of each community. And he finished by saying that the real problem here is that we have a very large misunderstanding of our religion. And this misunderstanding, unfortunately, leaves for a lot of room for negotiation, for discussion, for confusion about very basic parameters and fundamental ideas about our faith. And had we invested our times and energies into understanding our religion better, inshallah, we would progress more. Because the idea here is we want to build strong families, not break them apart. And so long as we learn to implement and be embodiments of our faith, inshallah, we will be able to trespass or rather to transcend these obstacles together. Now, inshallah, I'm going to move to the audience and to the questions that I received, and I'm going to ask our first question to our panelists here. The first question is, and I'll actually stipulate this to Sheikh Faraz because you had mentioned this in your speech. Under what conditions exactly does polygamy become A, permissible, and B, impermissible? So perhaps if you can offer examples of each scenario.
I mean, polygamy would be permissible if, in itself, like the issue of the law of the land is a major issue, and that is the issue of the law of the land. Even in the Muslim world, is not a simple matter. Just as an example, I was in Pakistan in 2007 doing some research, and I asked this question of Mufti Taqi Usmani's older brother, Mufti Rafi Usmani, who is the Grand Mufti of Pakistan. He said that about the issue about when something is permissible, but the law of the land deems it impermissible. And this happens in the Muslim world too. He said, he smiled and he said, and he's in his 70s. He said, this is a very good question. He said, we've been researching it for the last 40 years. Right? So I said, so what's the answer? He said, you want to answer it? He said, no, I'm asking you. I said, good question. Right? Because this is a very nuanced and very sensitive matter, right? So if we leave that aside, the condition for polygamy being permissible would be that the husband would be able to fulfill the rights of the first wife and the second, and benefit would clearly prevail in the resultant set of circumstances, right? Then it would be permissible. If it is feared that the husband would not fulfill the rights of both first and second wife, or if harm would prevail over benefit, then it would not be permissible. This is in itself besides the issue of the law of the land. Now, as Dr. Bashir said, in most of, like not just most, in the overwhelming majority of scenarios, this is not the case, right? At least what we see here in North America, 95 or 99% of the cases where someone either wants to get married to a second wife or has gotten married to a second wife, what we see prevailing is harm, right? So in that sense, you know, even leaving aside the issue of the law of the land for a second, in almost invariably, it is unwise. But that depends on where you are. When I was in Damascus, just down the road from me was a good friend of mine from Nigeria. He lived with 2 wives in a small little house. One wife was in one room and the other wife was in the other. And the 2 wives were best friends. One day we were walking together to the masjid. My friend Muhammad Amin, he said, make dua for my younger wife. He said, why? She said she's depressed. I said, why is she depressed? He said, because her friend traveled. I said, who's her friend? He says, oh, the older wife, right? But that's not the reality that we see, you know, even in a lot of Muslim countries. So it's but then even in North America, in some community, I went to San Diego to this community, largely Filipino and Mexican converts, and nearly everyone in the community had more than one wife, and you know, so in certain particular circumstances, and for them, I told them, but what about the law of the land? They said, we don't care. I said, well, then don't ask me to give an answer on that. So it's, you know,
something to be treated on a case-by-case basis.
But the general case, though, is, right? If someone asks in general, someone comes randomly and says, I'm thinking of taking a second wife, like in Jordan and Syria, they say, like, you know, just don't.
Avoid that,
right?
yeah.
And if they really do want to consider, right, just as a practical point, if someone really thinks that in their case they can, then do not take the step until you consult scholars who have experience in dealing with these kinds of issues, right? That if someone genuinely thinks that there are circumstances that would mean that they need to proceed on this, then go and consult before you take any such step.
Jazakallah khair. Before
Just very quick comment on the same. A very important condition for polygamy to be permissible is ensuring fairness at all levels. Ensuring fairness at all levels. And since the law of the land does not permit this practice, the second wife is always at disadvantage, and this condition is not fulfilled. So right away, because of the law of the land, the fairness is not going to be ensured. So it is not permitted. I would not advise anybody to go for it because you are not fulfilling one of the basic and fundamental conditions for polygamy, which is the fairness.
Jazakallah khair. I suspect that we don't have it. Do we have any time for one more question? So we have one question, and inshallah I'll try to address this to Dr. Zainab. Unfortunately, and this is something Dr. Amar al-Kaffi was saying, this is a very meaty, complex issue, and it's impossible really to fit it into a 50-minute panel with one of you, let alone all 4 of you, mashallah. So I really apologize for that. I apologize to all of you because there's lots of people who have written questions, and here we are on our second question, and we're already over time, and in fact we're going to have to wrap it up with this question. But inshallah I'm going to ask the question here, and the question is, would you consider polygamy recommended in situations of disasters, as in a flood, war, or other circumstances?
Yeah, again, this is the issue that when we started with, it's not as a universal practice as much as really related to disasters. And it's mentioned in Surah Al-Nisa, it started with the Yatama, and Yatama orphans. So there's some references to the issue of disaster and tragedies in the community, wars, natural disasters, and many other issues. So that's why when we discuss polygamy in a way, and this is again, it's maybe a woman perspective, but my understanding and with the even jurisprudence itself, when you look at the harm and the benefits of the practice itself, and you try to understand with maqasid al-sharia, and the first thing we have, it's the maintenance of the family, the security of the family, the safety of the family. And in this case, if that's what will happen, and I agree 100% with Dr. Bashir, If the law is against it from the beginning, it means there's injustice will happen against the wife and the children. So it means there's harm will be caused against them. So we have to be careful with this issue. Regarding also disasters, maybe in some areas, if it's really the disaster happen in the area that will allow the circumstances, everything, allow this practice, you have to also ask yourself about, and this is missing all the time, the consultation of the first wife, even if it's maybe in the countries they allow this practice. We have to also think about the stability of the first family, the stability of the family from the beginning, and it's our goal before even we start thinking about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we understand the complete and the holistic understanding of the law, of Islamic law, it goes to the benefit of humanity. So we have to also study and understand this specific polygamy issue in the light of a holistic law instead of a fragmented understanding.
So we have to look at essentially protecting the integrity of the family as a functional unit. And if polygamy were to threaten that, then it has to be seriously reconsidered. And in cases where, as Sheikh Faraz was saying, polygamy may actually promote it, then also people should open their minds more to the idea. Granted, of course, that they obey the existing laws of the land in which this is taking place.
But justice also, we have to think about justice. And justice is not only a word, justice is we have to practice it in all the levels, and especially with the first family and first wife and children.
Jazakumullah khair. On behalf of all of you, because I am like you, this is a very controversial issue. This is a question we're asked a lot about. There's a lot of brothers in the dawah that I know personally who are involved in dawah. And one of the heated questions amongst many that are constantly asked is this one. And as much as there's no way we could have conveyed enough justice to this topic in the time we were allotted, inshallah, we hope we have at least stimulated enough of you to look further into the issue, to ask more questions about it, and to really be comfortable with this topic, to discuss it with others, inshallah, and to teach others about what we have learned today. On behalf of all of you, inshallah, I'd like to thank our respected guests. Wa jazakumullah khair wa barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.